comments and allow for everyone to participate on their own terms. Give a content warning if what you're about to share might cause someone discomfort, and look for links in the chat. But so we'll go ahead and I will hand it off to Ashia to get started. I'm excited to have you here. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. We're a little bit of a smaller group today, but I love working with smaller groups because I feel like we can get into some cool discussion. We can spend a little bit more time with the work. So thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I just want to confirm that folks can see my screen. Okay, like a thumbs up or something. All right, cool. Thank you. So just a little bit about me and where I come from. I am Ashia. I use they, them pronouns. I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, which is my favorite place ever in the world. I was just there last week. It was so grounding and so wonderful. I'm a climate resilient schools educator and researcher here in Oakland, California. So a lot of the work that I do is around environmental justice, specifically food issues, access, becoming more resilient to climate change as a whole on a community level. And I think that that really influences my writing a lot and where I come from, what I write about. Not only that, but it also makes me think of the world and writing as this really interesting ecology with a bunch of different pieces interacting with each other, how they influence where we come from, what we write about, how we view the world. So I'm really excited to get into a little bit more of that. I would love for us to do introductions if folks are comfortable. Feel free to put it in the chat or come off of mute. Would love to know name, pronouns, any access needs, where do you call home, and where do you write from? So I can model what that looks like. My name is Ashia. I use they, them pronouns. All of my access needs are set, and I call Denver, Colorado home. And I write from my grandmother's kitchen. So I'll just pass it on to whoever wants to go next.
I can go next. My name is CD. I use they, them pronouns. My access needs are met. I call Southern California home, though I currently live in Northwest Arkansas. And Southern California is unceded Tongva land, and Northwest Arkansas is unceded Osage and Caddo land. And I write from a desk that I got at a thrift store.
Thank you, CD. Who's next? And feel free also, if you don't want to, or if you're not in a place to come off of mute, to use the chat too.
I can go next if that's good. Okay, so my name's Erin. I use she, they pronouns. My access needs are met. Oh my gosh, sorry if you heard my stomach grumbling. Where do I call home? Well, I'm from the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas, lived in Texas majority of my life, but I am now living in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I am in Texas for Thanksgiving right now. It's not my normal setup. Where do I usually write from? I love to write outdoors as much as possible. Thankfully, with Texas weather, it's pretty comfortable out majority of the time. So that is me.
Thank you, Erin. Yasmin, Eve, do either of you want to go? Sure. It's okay if not. We can leave it open. I like to start with this introduction just so that we can get to know each other a little bit more. And as a facilitator, I can see just like what kind of things you're looking to get out of this. Oh, thank you. Access needs met, she, her pronouns, Toronto, very cool. And writing from your couch, usually right from country chair, we can't reach it. Oh, nice. Thank you. And I'll also leave some room, either if you want to answer in the chat or if you want to come up with me. Totally cool. So before we start doing any reading or writing, I like to do a quick grounding exercise so that we can clear our minds a bit. On the right, there is this excerpt from Octavia Butler's journals, and her desire was to tell stories filled with facts, to make people feel things, to make our writing as lush and tasteful as possible. So I like to do a 5 senses grounding, going through the 5 senses, something you see, hear, touch, smell, taste, and get in like a comfy position. Whatever's good for you. You can close your eyes or lower your gaze if that's useful to you. And then you might want to reopen your eyes for this one. But then what is something that you can see in your room? Identify that. I see some dying flowers that I need to change out, but I can't bring myself to, because they're dying. They're like drying in a very cool way. They kind of complement the room. I live by the highway, so I hear cars passing by. I am feeling a very fuzzy blanket. I can smell coffee brewing. And I taste the like last little droplets of cool water that I had before this. So check in with yourself. What is something you see? What is something you hear? What's something you touch? Something that you smell? Something that you taste? And how do they interact with each other? Can take a few more seconds to take stock of that. And then we'll come back together and let out a nice deep breath and enter this space together. So usually I like to start off with a quote that I think synthesizes a lot of the relationship between humans and the environment. As someone who writes a lot about nature and writes a lot about environmental issues, I think oftentimes people see nature as separate from human beings, that we are outside of it or it's outside of us somehow. But the reason that grounding activity is so engaging to me is it helps me retake stock of all of the different interactions that happen in our life between nature, between the built environment, between the personal. This Sylvia Wynter quote is one of my favorites. She was writing about Journey to No Land by César, and she was thinking about the ways in which memory gets distorted, it gets forgotten, but it can also be reclaimed. And so I think a lot of work that humans have to do in terms of our relationship with nature is that reclamation work. So Sylvia Wynter says, human beings are magical, bios and logos, words made flesh, muscle and bone animated by hope and desire, belief materialized in deeds, deeds which crystallize our actualities. And the maps of spring always have to be redrawn again in undared forms. Does anybody have any initial thoughts or responses to this idea? Maps of spring always have to be redrawn in undared forms. when we think of spring, what are some word associations we have with spring? Redrawing, repetition, and regrowth. Very cool. Flowers, yes. Other things that we associate with spring: bees, pollination, newness, grass. It's like we're coming out of a time of hibernation, something that brings things forward. Life, prettiness, softness have to be redrawn in undared forms. If we're working within, sorry, my cat loves to hang out. This is Tallulah. If we're thinking in terms of spring, of newness, of new growth, I think that's something that we can also apply to humans, and it's something that we can apply to our writing. So as we are thinking and as we are writing, what are the new undared forms that you want to look forward to? This is a workshop about climate futures. While we are going to be talking a lot about past writers, I think the past definitely influences our future. So what are the new undared forms? Looking at some of these past mistakes, past wrongs, some things that worked in the past well, reclaiming some of that ancestral, spiritual, traditional knowledge. What new undared forms can we bring to the future? Hi, Eve, no problem. Glad that you can be here. A little bit about climate storytelling. The purpose of storytelling is to facilitate connection, curiosity, and understanding. I am coming from a long tradition of Black storytellers, be that via like African griots, grandmothers who just like sat around and told us stories as lessons. Also reading a lot of myths when I was a kid. I think that storytelling helps convey important messages, and it also helps us reimagine those new undared forms. It helps us promote urgency and develop feelings. It reveals what's important, what our values are. And recently there's been a lot of work around how poetry helps to increase empathy and can actually be a very effective teaching tool when it comes to topics like climate change. Climate change is a big, scary thing. It's something that we see and we don't see. We know the numbers, we see it at our doorsteps, but we also see it in really far away areas. Some days it seems like things are just peachy keen, you know, so it's like a very, I think, disorienting thing. And to be able to tell a story behind it, to be able to have a narrative, to be able to trace back to how certain phenomena that we think are unique or haven't occurred before, to see how it has occurred in history before. And it is part of a long lineage of environmental harm is super important to know and to really grasp as we are working through the climate crisis. And of course, storytelling itself has been a cornerstone of the Black tradition since before the slave trade. It's a way to harbor memory, pass on tradition from generation to generation, and really, I think, sit with the important history that has led us up until the present and will inform our future. I've been gabbing a lot. I want to pause and see if anybody has any questions or reflections about storytelling, or any of the Sylvia Wynter quote that we talked about. Was anybody here like any kind of mythology, like super into mythology as a kid? A little bit here. Okay, I'm getting like a big nod from Erin. Yeah. So I think that's also where I come from a lot too. I loved mythology, like Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Norse, Egyptian, West African. I just loved the storytelling aspect of it. And as I was like rereading a lot of myths, I was like, wow, a lot of these are like about environmental phenomena. Like Titans were like an allegory for, you know, like earthquakes and other types of and floods and other types of climate change. I'm forgetting the names of them, but when Odysseus meets like the typhoon and like some other sea creature. Like the sea creatures are like embodiments of natural disasters, which is so cool. And I think a really cool way that humans have interpreted how the environment has been a friend and a foe to us in certain ways. And he is a Percy Jackson kid, classic. Awesome. All right, climate storytelling. Speaking of the future, climate storytelling isn't a new wave. Like I was saying, humans have been creating stories around environment for time immemorial. Fables, allegories, religious texts, even stuff like Brer Rabbit, Anansi the Spider, a lot of indigenous creation myths from Hopi nations, Dene, Lakota. A lot of them have to do with human relationship to the environment or other ecological relationships between like different species as well. So like, you know, rabbit and the fox, like things like that. It's like a lot of what we see in our environment helps us better understand how we interact as humans and like kind of vice versa. So it simultaneously positions humans in collaboration with environment and the environment as an obstacle or foe. I think one dangerous thing is that, you know, environment isn't like always 100% on our side, but it isn't always 100% against us. There are things that we are going to constantly be working through, things that we're constantly learning new relationships to. Nothing is as fixed as it seems. So that's really important to think about when we're thinking about talking about climate, and we're thinking about incorporating it in our writing as well. And of course, given our current situation, it's reemerged as a very integral part of media and literature. A lot of, I mean, even from like stuff like Don't Look Up, that the movie that came out on Netflix, to there's like a lot of dystopian books that are coming out now. So it's always kind of reoccurring in new and different forms. I am not on my, you know, like I try not to be on my toxic positivity wave, but for the purposes of this workshop, I try to avoid dystopia because I think that it is so common and present in literature. And I try to encourage students to think about, well, what are like the really good environmental memories you have, and what do we need to do in order to like continue to make more of those? What's the future that we can dream up together? So the first thing that I want to do is I want to look at a climate myth. One of my favorite writers, Levi Strauss, asked, where does mythology end and history start? That's such a cool connection for me, and I think that it's especially relevant in reading this story as well. So because we're a smaller group, and I think that some folks might not be able to come off of mute and off camera, I usually like to do popcorn reading, but I think we'll adjust for this time, and we'll take, it's a really short story. So how about we take 5 minutes to read it, and then we can discuss together. Does that work for folks? Especially folks who are currently off camera. The link should be the first link in the document that CD put in the chat, but I'll also put the link in the chat as well. All right, about 1 more minute if you're still working. If not, we'll just like chill for a little bit. All right. So hopefully folks had the chance to get through the story. If not, totally fine. We'll discuss some stuff together. But to summarize, this is a story about a river god. And usually what I like to do is I like to go through this story paragraph by paragraph because of a lot of the really cool environmental metaphor and mythology that's woven into it. So Nyami Nyami is a river god. He has a body like a snake, head like a fish. No one knows how big he is, but he's like very big. Oftentimes, how I've interpreted, especially reading other kind of mythologies like El Chupacabra, like the Minotaur, oftentimes when it's these animals that are merged with humans or have multiple different figures, they're supposed to represent what is within that body, what's in that biome, what's in that ecosystem. So snakes, not so much as they've evolved now, are water animals. There are some river snakes, but there's also amphibians that live in the river, which are related to snakes. There's also thinking about, like prehistoric times, the evolution of creatures. And then of course, a head like a fish. Fish is a super important part of river, especially for people in the world who depend a lot on water sources for sustenance. That's where fish come from. That's where shrimp, other crustaceans. So a lot of these gods, they're supposed to be embodiments of the different elements in that particular region, in that particular biome. So we have Nyami Nyami, who's a river god. I also find it really fascinating how a lot of gods have animal-like features. Why do people think that is? Why are so many gods represented as animals? And not even gods, but just like really powerful creatures, creatures with a lot of power, with a lot of influence. Uncontrollable, powerful otherness. Yeah, I mean, like from a human's perspective, we really only understand humans. We don't understand what's going on in the brain of like a rhino or even my cat. I don't know what's going on in her brain half the time. It's to kind of think about that otherness, but there is a power in that otherness. And animals oftentimes have powerful adaptations to their environment too. Usually like before it rains, like, or before a huge storm, like your dog or your cat will like start acting funny, or the chickens will like start acting funny. The cows will like get like a little spooked. So they have, that other sense that oftentimes we rely on them to better understand, what might be going on in our environment. So thinking about that, looking at the second paragraph, he fed people from his own meat in times of hunger. People pledged their allegiance to him by performing ceremonial dances. I don't know if folks are familiar with the Lakota phrase, water is life. I mean, what does that say? Water is life. Like everything that we can do is because we have water, because we have access to it. If you're in a region that is very water poor or water scarce, especially, water is going to be super valuable to you. So it takes on, you know, this kind of godlike image as well. So he has his wife here, and then they separate. She goes down to answer prayers and bless her people. Does anybody think, like, what do people think that she is blessing people with? She goes down to answer people's prayers and bless them. If she's the wife of the river god, she has some sort of water power herself. Blessing them with water, yes. A specific type of water. Rain, yes. So she's going, it's like talking about these water cycles, you know, evaporation, precipitation, like all of this. So she's going to go and bless them with rain. What this means is that because of the life cycle, the river might be a little lower than normal. So then, of course, as she's gone away, she's not, the husband is still present, Yami Yami is still present, but she's gone away. So they're split up. That means that there's a separation between the amount of water there. Then some colonizers, white folks, come and then they put in a wall. He did not want to be disturbed. It took 5 long years to see it through. There's this, I'm going to butcher it, but there's this really awesome Toni Morrison quote that I'm paraphrasing, where she talks about water having a memory and water returning to where it's always remembers that it was, to better explain a lot of the flooding in the Midwest. Missouri, Wisconsin, parts of Kansas were all swamp before we drained that swamp and put in a bunch of buildings. And so when we see a lot of sinks, when we see a lot of flooding, because water is trying to return to where it's supposed to be. So we are able to, in this myth, we're able to interpret water as, or Nami Nami as being disturbed as a natural disaster. As a drought, as floods, because the earth is mad. When you look at the more kind of ecological reasons behind stuff like hurricanes, floods, oftentimes it's because the earth is trying to heal itself, which is why they're usually called natural disasters. But natural disasters have a very human impact as well. So we learn a little bit more about the human impact here. So in order to interpret a lot of environmental phenomenon, specifically natural disasters, to also talk about how humans influence environment too. We see a lot of that in this myth. We see powerful gods, we see humans trying to figure out how to appease the gods, we see the influence of colonization. And that's something that is really important when we're thinking about environmental writing. Oftentimes we think of it as this linear process. We burn too many fossil fuels, so that's why our air is like super polluted. But there's also different layers to it too. Some areas are going to experience that pollution a lot worse than others. That pollution is going to have a chain reaction to the plant life in that area. It's going to have a very human impact. So I think that this story is a really great kind of way to do a entry point into diversifying and layering our environmental narratives as well. Does anybody have any questions or comments, reflections? This is like a very quiet group, so I want to make sure people are with me. Thank you, C. Cool. All right. So I think we should do a little bit of writing, and then I have another poem to get into, but we'll see how writing goes this time, and and we'll do a check-in just to see how people are feeling. Thinking about the story of Yami Yami, thinking about Sylvia Winter, I invite you to try your own creation story prompt. So choose an object, and I want to challenge folks, like, it's cool if you want to do like a natural object. I mean, the story of Yami Yami was about a river. But sometimes I like to do this with a with like a pillow or with a food item that I really love. As you can see, I chose a popsicle before. Um, I like to do this with trying to think what else. Yeah, food items really work really well, and then also just like random objects in a book even is like a really cool object to choose as well. Maybe there's a candle that you really like. Choose a random object. Can have sentimental value that might also help you with creating its life cycle a little bit more, but whatever works for you. What is its life cycle? How is it born? How will it die? What does it do in between them? We'll take 10 minutes for this first writing prompt, and then we'll check in around, would that be, 2:52. Sorry, I was doing like the time zones. So we'll come back at 2:52. All right, take about 30 more seconds to finish up your final thoughts. All right. How was that for folks? What did we write about? Which objects did we choose? I chose a blanket with snails on it. Wall calendar, very cool. Pearl necklace, nice. Does anybody want to read a little bit of what they wrote? Open space to share. Oh my gosh, that's amazing, Erin. Couldn't let go of this image of mermaids spitting up bones, and they're made into little balls. I love that. I feel like that image is gonna like stick with me for the rest of the day too. That's how I hope pearls are. Beautiful. Yes, then Eve, did y'all want to share what you wrote about? Or any of the lines that you wrote? Ooh, okay. 999-page book, matte black cover. Ah, glows in the dark. Art design. Very cool. All good. I feel like that's like the place to start, you know. All writing is like good thinking first. I don't know if anybody's seen that tweet that's just like 90% of walking or writing is me going on a little walk. And that's how I definitely feel like my writing process is. Yeah, thinking about a sea creature. Well, cool. So CD, I saw that we go till 3:30, right? Is that cool? Or should we go for the hour?
It is up to whatever folks want. That's usually just like a buffer.
Mhm.
If you have a little bit more, we can definitely do that, but totally up to you. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, how about we close here? I have like a couple little final things to think about. But thank you so much for participating in this workshop. I hope that it was generative for folks. It's awesome what Open Mouth Lit Center is doing, and thank you for taking a piece of your Sunday to get a little bit of inspiration, I hope. I am obsessed with nature poetry, with environmental poetry, and I particularly love it as it deals with the different layered aspects of identity. So I have some suggestions for some readings if people are interested, especially if you loved the mythology piece that we read, a few readings to continue that. Ghost fishing and eco justice poetry anthology is a great option. I think came out 2020, has a lot of really cool Black eco poets in it. And then if you're looking a little bit more for essay writing, The Colors of Nature is super awesome. And then a couple things on craft, on writing about nature, land, human relationship through the Poetry Foundation as well. And Yasmin, thank you so much for sharing. It will never ever die. The ideas within are transmitted from page to brain and expressed in material form and so on. Oh, I love that. I see like the influence of like winter, your own like thoughts. It's like such a cool, succinct way to think about. It was a book too. So thank you so much for sharing. And I have a book coming out next year in April that's going to be talking about a lot of the same stuff. So it's called Heirloom with Right Bloody Publishing. I will be posting things on my website and on my social media in the coming months because pre-orders are going to come out soon. But yeah, I guess I'll pause there. Does anybody have any questions or final comments?
Definitely check out Ashia's book when it comes out. I believe you said it was April 2020.
Yes.
Yes. Look out for Heirloom. In the meantime, you can also come to the reading that Ashia will be a part of tonight. I put the Eventbrite link in the chat. It'll be at 7 with another poet, Bana El Gadbana, and some other folks doing opening readings, but definitely come by to hear Ashia's work. But thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure to sit with you all and talk about these things. This is an amazing workshop. Love getting book recommendations, so this is a great